Welcome back to the channel, guys. So they say that the first step towards recovery is to admit that you have a problem. And I have to admit, man, I am very addicted to very high bite, very strong brake pads. Basically, guys, I really like these super high bite, very strong mu brake pads, okay? So far, my favorite pads have been these Hawk DTC 70s and 60s. I ran the 60s in the Evo as well. I think the 60 is like, it would be my perfect pad for the front that has a decent amount of modulation, but on a heavy car, heavy fast car, they're just not gonna last, okay? These pads just don't last that much, and they're very aggressive on the rotors. They don't last, so there's a lot of issues with them. Now, the other thing, the main thing, moving on from just the wear rates and stuff like that, is that, you know, I think that the next step for me as a driver is to really work on that deep trail braking, okay? Being able to carry heavy braking while turning the car, okay? And with these pads, I just don't feel comfortable. The release is just too abrupt, okay? I barely move the pedal and I get a lot of braking force. And honestly, I have more brake than tire at this point, okay? I'm locking up tires all around and stuff like that. Maybe one day if I go back to using slicks, okay, but on these street tires that I'm using, you know, it's just too much braking force for me to be able to modulate the brakes properly. The next thing after that is the wear rates, okay? So even though I have these big meat patty 25mm brake pads, now I'm to the point where these pads are only lasting me about 3 days, sometimes 2.5, depending on, you know, how much I push, okay? And these rotors are only lasting me about 5 days, okay? So these rotors have 4 days on them. It's gonna be hard to see because I washed the car earlier, so it's got some rust on it, but you can see that the craze lines are starting to reach to the edge, and guarantee you next track day these will crack through the inner or outer edge, one of the two, but they will crack. Okay, so I am going through, you know, especially in the front, I'm going through the brake system, the brake parts, the brake consumables at a pretty high clip. So I'm gonna try to quit cold turkey, going from a super high sprint type brake pad to an endurance, a true endurance type of brake pad. So Endless is definitely not a brand that you see being used a whole lot on Corvettes, but it is definitely a brand that I'm very familiar with. A lot of my JDM and Evo friends have definitely heard of this, and I'm sure most of you have heard of Endless, okay? But definitely not a brand that you see being used much in the United States. It is hard to come by, and if you buy it in the United States, guys, I'm not gonna lie, these pads are very expensive if you buy from an US distributor, okay? But a hack for that is to buy direct from Japan. It is more difficult, and as you see, well, I was supposed to get these pads without this nib, okay? They make these pads with this nib and without the nib. I thought I was getting the ones without the nib, but this is the ones that show up. No big deal, I can just cut this off. But this just kind of points to, it is difficult to know what you're ordering, because these the Japanese websites, they're not very descriptive. They just kind of copy and paste whatever the description on the manufacturer's website is. So, you know, but you can get these from Right Hand Drive, you can get these from blackhawkjapan.com, you can get them from japanparts.com. So there's many sites, many Japanese sites that you can source Endless, and trust me, guys, it's gonna be less than half of what you find them from US distributors. So these are the MA45B, which is this is a true endurance compound. That's what they're marketed for. They're marketed for GT type endurance races. On their website, they say that on GT cars, you know, they can go up to 12 hours, which for me would be like, if I did every single minute of every single session of every single track outing that I did, it would be 2.5 hours. So call it that average, I go out 2 hours. So that would be 6 days or so. So, I mean, they definitely promise much higher, much less wear rate, okay? But it does come at a price of much lower mu or braking bite or force, okay? I don't really know what mu stands for, but it's something about like the unit of measurement of how braking force is measured or something like that. Anyway, don't quote me on that. But anyways, I'll put a chart up here. Hopefully you can see it clearly. But basically the Hawks by Hawk's measurements, operate somewhere around 50 to up to 60, 55 or so average, okay? Whereas these Endless pads, these MA45Bs, operate like in the 30s, low 30s, 30 to 33 peak is usually what they show on their chart. So, you know, almost halving, and in some instances halving the amount of mu or force. You know, so it's definitely a huge jump down. So that's why I was saying that I'm going to quit cold turkey. Now, one thing about this is that I don't think there's not like a standard measurement or a standard test. Okay, so like endless measurements may be different than Hawk's measurements. So even though they say that they have 55 mu and they have 30 mu, you know, they may feel different. So this is just for me a complete unknown. We'll see. But definitely, if these are made specifically for endurance, and these are made specifically for sprint type, you know, these are definitely going to have a lot less bite. You know, the next thing I'm going to be changing is the rotors. Okay, so these rotors are about to be done. I'm going to pull them off. I'm going to be going to Rotalana, and I don't want to be dealing with trying to swap these out. I'm going to keep them around just for an emergency. Okay, but these are about done. Now, I do think that these rotors, these AP rotors, they're good. Don't get me wrong, they are good. But all these hooks, I think they chew the pad more quickly. And that does give you better feel, better immediate feel, okay? But I think that, again, these are chewing up the brake pads a little bit quicker. So these are wearing the brake pads at a faster rate, okay? And again, I'm going through them at a pretty good clip. So I am going to be trying out these Paragon replacements. Okay, so this is a direct replacement for AP and stuff like that. I do think these are Chinese made. I'm not going to lie. I don't know. These are supposed to be made in the UK, but who knows nowadays, you know, it seems like everything is made in China. So I'm going to be pulling those off and comparing. I do think there's some slight differences, but the main key difference is these only have, you know, these slots around. They don't have as many hooks. So I think that there will be a sacrifice on brake feel, but hopefully it gives me better, you know, better brake pad life, again, because, you know, we're not clawing at the pad, you know what I mean, as much. All right, so here's the Paragon rotor and the AP rotor. This rotor, the Paragon rotor, does feel a little heavier. I'm not going to put weights on here just because this rotor is already used. So this rotor did lose some weight. But yeah, just you know, by feeling it by hand, this feels considerably heavier. I think that the difference is that these the vents on the APs are bigger than this. So I think this one has a little bit more vents. Therefore, it has more, you know, more metal mass, just because these are a little bit more packed together. Other than that, the width is the same. Obviously, this width is the same. The thickness over here is the same. So they're very, very similar. And obviously, the main difference would be, you know, that this one only has these few slots, and this one has, you know, all those hooks. So anyways, I'm almost done putting this back together. So let me finish up over here, and then I'll break the pads in and give you guys my impressions of what they're like on the street. Okay, so far on the street, I bit them in and all that. On the street, they feel amazing, to be honest. They have a good amount of bite. They don't have. I thought they were going to have very little bite because of like what the advertised mu is. Now they may act differently once they get really hot on the track, so we'll still have to see that. Okay, but so far on the street, they act really good. They don't dust anywhere near as much as the Hawks. The Hawks at this point, the wheels would be, you know, like a gunmetal gray. And there is some dust there. I'll show you guys here before I end the video, but nowhere near as much as the Hawks. So that's definitely a big plus. They don't make noise. Now my Hawks didn't used to make noise before I did the rear APs. For some reason, once I did the rear APs, they became super noisy. But these so far have been quiet on the street. Every now and then I've heard a little bit of a eep, but very, very low, like very, very, very low, barely there. Okay. I can get into ABS, so they're definitely strong enough that they overpower the Supercar 3Rs. Again, obviously on the street, the tires are not at full grip, so there's a little asterisk there. But so far, they feel great in the street. If they work out, this will be a great pad that you could use on the track and on the street. They feel great. They do have more bite than a street pad, but not as aggressive as a very, as the DTC 70 or Furoto 312 and the like type pads, Cobalt XR1s, like those type of pads that I'm addicted to. Let's try to do a little bit of a pull here. First, second, third, on the brakes. Oh, yep, I can definitely get it to ABS. So, that never gets old. So yeah, I mean, so far they're strong. They're not. It's not like I lost half the bite. So I'm glad that I did listen. I wasn't only focused on the charts, because yeah, definitely the charts, because of the differences in the way that they may be testing that and how they come up to that number. It's obviously different. You know what I mean? There's no way that this pad has, a little bit less than half, or a little bit more than half, sorry, of the braking force than a DTC 70. I would put this into like touching a DTC 60, maybe a DTC 50, if any of you guys have ever used that. Maybe XR2 or thereabouts. Okay, if you're talking about Cobalt, or like a Carbotech, maybe like an XB20, not down to a 12, but about the 20. So that kind of bite is what I'm talking about. So very, very strong. Definitely way more than what you can use on the street. So again, now I'm really excited of how these will feel on the track. Yeah, so this is not a horrendous amount of dust. Okay, on the Hawks, these wheels will be completely like a graphite color, like the color of the caliper. And they look like they got some pretty good bedding in there for sure. So yeah, there's dust, guys. You know what I mean? But if you would consider this pad for street and track, I think that's a good compromise. The rear, similar amount. Okay, but again, nowhere near as much. It's looking nice for sure. All right, so unfortunately, to get a true test, obviously on the track and stuff like that, we're gonna have to wait for the next video. What the hell? There must be a freaking iguana in there. Guarantee there's a freaking iguana in there. Yeah, so we're gonna have to wait for the next video for the track. We're gonna be taking the car out to Road Atlanta. Super excited. Josh is gonna come. Hopefully we get good weather. It's gonna be hot. They call it Hot Atlanta in the summer. So it's gonna be at the end of May and the first day of June. So it's gonna be nice and toasty. But you know what? It's already 98 degrees here in South Florida, guys. So you know what I mean? It's just par for the course of my daily life. All right. Oh, one more thing. If you guys like to see me yapping, like if you guys like to see my face yapping some more, drop me a comment. Let me know. The channel's never been about me, and it's not really about me. It's always been about the cars and about the stuff and about the track and the experience and all that kind of stuff. You guys obviously see my videos, but if you guys would like to see me yapping in person some more, I'll consider adding in more here and there. All right, guys, thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.